Everyone, right here at the top of the day, I want to wish everyone a very happy Cash Patel Day. He should be officially confirmed today, but just to make sure we get him over the finish line, please go to lacag.org and send Senator Cassidy and Kennedy a final encouragement, even a thank you in advance, because I believe they both agreed to have indicated they'll be voting for him. But it never hurts to apply some positive pressure. So go over there and do that. That's the
Action Center, Action Center, to the
yeah.
Action Center.
Okay. And that was the housekeeping note for this morning. And on to our guest now. Joining us today is a man who is a hero for our state in my eyes. We have with us today Louisiana Superintendent of Education, Dr. Cade Brumley. Dr. Brumley, before we start talking to you, I'm going to read the scripture of the day. It is 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 12. And it says, "The confidence of my calling enables me to overcome every difficulty without shame, for I have an intimate revelation of this God, and my faith in him convinces me that he is more than able to keep all that I have placed in his hands safe and secure until the fullness of his appearing." And as I was reading this morning, Paul wrote these letters to Timothy while he was in prison. So it was a very dark time when he was literally bound in chains. And the confidence he had in his calling enabled him to overcome every difficulty without shame. This is why it's so important that we not only know the Lord and have an intimate, ongoing relationship with him, but we have to understand and live in the calling he's placed on our lives. Because when difficulties come to us in that position or role, we need to be assured beyond the shadow of a doubt that he has called us there. He has placed us there, and he will ensure that our work succeeds even when circumstances make it so that we seem helpless to move it forward ourselves.
You know who else, Danielle, has great confidence in their calling is Dr. Cade Brumley, who's here with us today, Louisiana Education Superintendent. Dr. Brumley, what a pleasure to have you with us today, sir. Yeah,
Yeah.
I believe that too. And based upon some of the things we're seeing, Dr. Brumley, your prayers have been efficacious. It looks like according to the national stats, Louisiana is steadily improving, particularly in the area of reading, which is so important in order to be able to be successful in any facet of life, to be proficient in reading. What do you attribute that to under your leadership?
Yeah.
And Dr. Brumley, just for the benefit of our audience, where were we ranked before you assumed your leadership position?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Dr. Brumley, you mentioned chasing after shiny things. Your emphasis has been on elementary schools getting back to the basics of academic learning. Would you talk about your philosophy and the approach that you're directing to the schools across the state? Yeah.
Yeah.
And those are educational.
Absolutely, educational and academic.
Yeah.
Um, Dr. Brumley, you've lived through the Biden administration, and now we have the Trump administration. Notwithstanding your views generally about the Department of Education federally, and we'll get into that. Um, it looks as though the federal government and the Department of Education, President Trump, are actually supporting now your philosophical approach to education. Um, how important is that? That you're not having to worry at this point about being undermined by a radical leftist federal government that seems to be constantly at odds with your focus and your approach. I love that Linda McMahon was put in that job just for the optics of someone from the WWE going in to destroy the Department of Education. Right. I can see her walking in and pillaging the offices in the Department of Education.
Awesome. Do you have any indication from your seat at that table on what the closure, the ultimate closure of DOE will mean for the direction of funding and some of the initiatives that DOE has picked up over the years that perhaps is not really their role to be doing anyway?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I saw your letter, Dr. Brumley, and if they're going to attack you on that, they might as well attack Martin Luther King, because your approach in that letter was exactly what Dr. Martin Luther King believed and expressed. That we're to evaluate, promote, and judge people based upon their content and their merit, and not on their race or any other extraneous factor. So, your position is absolutely well grounded, and not only in natural law, but in really consistent with the greatest uh, African American moral teacher in the last 100 years, Dr. Martin Luther King. So I applaud you for that. Um, Getting back for a second to the Department of Education, if the federal government and McMahon does what it looks as though they may do, which is to try to return so much of the educational priorities and emphasis and administration to the states, ultimately, the Department of Education may become something that's not necessary in the country if this is done the right way. Um, because, as you've emphasized, the best people to administer education are those on the very local and on the state level. And so perhaps it's an issue that may ultimately take care of itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. Um, I want to talk for a minute, Kate, about this recent legislative fiscal auditor report that came out. The Department of Education was one of the agencies that was cited in that report. And apparently, according to this report, over Department of Education over reported 2.3 billion in federal child nutrition grants and misclassified the date supposedly of nearly $1 million in education stabilization funds, and did not properly document La Carte and travel card expenses. Now, you've given a very clear response to this. Your department has, that this was essentially a coding error, and it did not affect funding at all. Talk about that report, and so we can allow our listeners to get some clarity on that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how beautiful is it gonna be to never have to report to the federal government again? Sure.
Yeah. Well, it's unfortunate, Dr. Brumley. It's unfortunate because it's misleading. It's unfortunate because it's inaccurate, and it allows people to make inferences and conclusions that simply are not true. I mean, you could make a strong argument that this should not even belong in this report. Now, to his credit, the auditor did give you an opportunity to respond to it, and that your response is there, but there's a strong argument to be made that this shouldn't even be in this report because of a very simple explanation for it. But either way, we certainly understand your explanation for it, and I know our listeners will as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunate. Um, Dr. Brumley, is our state still receiving COVID education, COVID money for education? How much money has the education department received in the past? Where is it? And where are we on that issue now?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Dr.
one of the things, excuse me for just a second, Danielle. One of the things I have to point out here that you did, Dr. Brumley, that has allowed our students to overcome those deficits caused by COVID was your push to end the quarantine for our students and to get them back in the classroom. And if you had not fought so hard on that, we may well still be trying to overcome these academic deficits. Right.
We're grateful you haven't been. And Dr. Brumley, you said that a lot of the students on the whole in the state have really caught up from COVID. Obviously, the southern part of the state was hit very hard by some hurricanes, Hurricane Ida, and I know there were some in Lake Charles, I believe, as well. Have the students in those hurricane affected areas caught up to the extent? Yeah,
Yeah,
great. I hope so too. I
me
believe it
too.
will be. All eyes have been on all things fiscal these last few weeks with Elon Musk and Doge being, at the head on every headline. I mean, leading every news report. And Governor Landry has established a sort of Doge task force for the state of Louisiana as well to take a look at state funding. Have you been directed to look for areas of cuts at your department as well? Do you have any indication on whether the state as a whole will take a look differently at expenditures? Meaning, if you this concept that we've had for years and years on end, that if you don't use it, you lose it. Is there going to be a different approach taken that would incentivize savings over spending? Yeah.
It's an economic issue as well. Crime.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things, Dr. Brumley, that I've noticed that distinguishes Louisiana, not in a good way, from other states, is it seems like when you look at Mississippi, you look at Florida, you look at South Carolina, Tennessee, the leaders there, and I'm not saying we don't have some good leaders in elected positions here, we do, but it seems as though we're doing a lot of cutting around the edges here. And we're not really hacking at the roots of the fiscal inefficiency, the bloated government. And it's as though too many of our leaders want to make decisions without making tough decisions, without offending people, without doing things that are going to require um, significant adverse consequences in the short term for people in state government. And you know, we're looking forward to seeing some tough decisions that have to be made if we're ever going to get to a point where we need to be. We cannot have our cake and eat it too anymore in the state of Louisiana. You've had to make tough decisions, and we're looking, you know, we need leaders in this state who are willing to make the hard decisions to get our state out of the rut that we're in. And stop cutting around the edges of these issues. And it's quite frustrating, to be honest with you. Yeah. We've been told a number of times, Dr. Brumley, that it always helps. We agree with you to have citizens aligned with the legislative leaders and the elected leaders so that they do feel buttressed and fortified in what they're doing. Everybody needs that in life, and elected leaders are certainly included in that. Well, Dr. Brumley, before we let you go today, I want to remind our listeners that on Tuesday, we will have Aaron Harrell on our show. We had Jeremy Harrell on recently, who is the former Army veteran who's been prosecuted by the federal government. Probably has already begun serving a jail sentence for simply trying to do good for others in his nonprofit. But his wife will come on. And unfortunately, and I hope this doesn't happen, Danielle may have jury duty next week. And if she does, then we will have to postpone that show. But she may have to go do her civic duty. But we're certainly hoping that we'll be here on Tuesday for that interesting show. Dr. Brumley, I got to tell you, man, we are lucky to have you in the state of Louisiana. I've been so impressed with your leadership, the things that you've done to bring this state forward. and I'm just looking forward to seeing where we go. And I know you well enough to know that your goal is for us to be number one in the country. I know that's your goal, and if anybody can get us there, you can do it. God bless your efforts. Thank you
Awesome.
for joining us.
Yeah. God bless you. Hey, Dr. Brumley, would you stick with us for just a minute? Your upload is a little bit slow. You don't necessarily have to stay with your phone. You could put